is Show Me the Money, your weekly guide to who's making the cash, how they're doing it, and what it means for the way we work. Screening tonight, our main feature, Tim Richards. He runs View Cinemas. One of his picture houses has the biggest box office in Britain. Also starring Rosie Wolfenden. She's the sparkler behind the British jewellery company Tatty Divine, with plans for a big production in America. And always scripting the best lines and keeping a sharp eye on the price of popcorn as well. Money journalist Lucy Tobin from the London Evening Standard. Another day, another attack on the Chancellor's plans to tax refunds for people who give money to charity. Over 40 of the most generous donors have written to the Sunday Telegraph. They say the plans will mean less money for good causes. Charities, universities, fellow cabinet ministers, even senior Tory party money men, they all agree. But the government says some of the super rich donate to dodgy charities to save tax, not to do good. Tim, starting with you on this, are you one of the super rich that gives to charity and enjoys the tax break?
No, not yet. But I think this does feel like another kind of coalition compromise. And I'm chair of a kind of a 20-year-old children's charity, Hope and Homes for Children. And I know with our charity that 80% of our funding comes from 5% of the donors. So something like this would have a very profound impact on our charity, and our charity is not unique. And
I was going to say, is that specific to your charity, or is that the funding model for most charities? Most of the money comes from a small number of people.
No, our charity is not unique, and I think what you're seeing is that maybe there are a few bad eggs who actually do take advantage of the system. But the impact this would have, and it feels like a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. You can't just like turn off the tap that quickly. And that's part of the problem, is that this would have such a major impact on charities today if that were to go through.
And this argument that charities will end up with less money if this tax break is capped, you believe that to be true? You expect that your charity will have less money as a result of this?
Unquestionably would, yes.
Lucy Tobin, on one side of the argument there is the argument that if you give money to charity, you shouldn't pay tax on it. The other side of the argument is that the state is entitled to take tax on money earned, and then what you do with that money afterwards, whether you give it to charity or not, is your business, not the government's.
Yeah, but I think it feels slightly baffling that the government's come out with this policy very hot on the heels of spending the past few years emphasising the fact that the public purse is emptier, that the private sector and charities need to fill the gap. And the fact is we are seeing more vulnerable people facing greater cuts, more homeless people needing food and ill people needing medicines, and the government is saying to the charities, come and fill that gap, come and help us out, and then to come up with a policy which really disincentivises giving the charities, the revenues that they need to do that feels a little bit baffling.
Why do you think the government might be doing this? Because politically it feels like a strange position where you have a Conservative Chancellor effectively saying we think the state should have the money first because it can use the money better than charities can.
It feels like something they're floating and that they're going to end up U-turning on. I think the condemnation is just too wide for them to go ahead with.
Rosie Wolfenden, what do you think about this?
I think it should be an incentive and not a reward, and I think it'd be a real shame if it had a bad impact on the arts. They had such an inspiration to designers like us, and some of our biggest customers are big art institutions like the Tate or the Baltic, and I know that those kind of places would suffer under this act.
And from your knowledge of working closely with these artistic organisations, these artistic charities, they will be in a similar position to Tim's charities. They rely on individual wealthy donors.
They really depend on, they rely on it, absolutely.
It feels a bit like the government's having a slightly academic argument with itself about where it should come from and are the wealthy giving because they want to give or giving because of the tax break. But really, if you're a homeless person who's relying on a charity, who's relying on those revenues to fill their coffers, then it's really irrelevant. You just want something to come from somewhere. The government's saying it can't afford it, charities need to step in. So closing that gap again doesn't seem very fair.
Tim, just a thought from you as someone who is chair of a charity as well as someone who knows people who give donations to charity. Can the donations from one or two wealthy people, that bedrock of funding, can that be replaced by a lot of small donations from elsewhere?
Well, I mean, the answer is yes, but not. Those things take time. I mean, I know how hard that we work on every single donation and every donor, and how much time we spend on them, and it takes a long time to build up a donor base. So those are not things that appear overnight. So this would have a massive impact, and I mean, this is the government. This is the big society government. You kind of wonder, like, what happened there? I mean, it is just a complete left turn.
Okay, Tim, thank you very much. Well, in these tough trading times, here's a reminder that you should never say never in business. The old British steel mill at Redcar relit its blast furnace this evening, some 2 years after it was mothballed. Many of the 1,600 workers who had lost their jobs will now be re-employed. The first steel slabs are likely to be produced over the next 3 days. The plant, of course, now owned by the Thai company SSI. And now some news that will smelt your heart. It's boom or bust. Starting with this towering achievement, the world's first, and we're guessing the world's only, sand museum. Taxi, please. You might think it goes against the grain, but people from around the world have landed on its shores. And there are plenty of British icons, from the Houses of Parliament to Old Queen Bess. Shakespeare's there as well, but they don't seem to give a dickens about Dickens. You might need to sit down for this one. It's a shampooing robot on trial in a city in western Japan. Sensors in the robot's hands scan the shape of the customer's head. The robot then wets and washes the hair with 24 robo fingers. They haven't yet taught the robot how to ask about your holidays or how to say, "Oh, I know," when you're describing life's weekly dramas. And say hi to Harry. He might eventually turn into a 300-kilo beast, but right now he's a cute and adorable abandoned hippo cub. Certainly adorable enough to get these keepers to bottle feed him every 3 hours and then pop him in the bath after every feed. Keepers say that they have to keep him moist, as hippos spend 80% of their time in the water when in the wild. The plan is to reunite him with his parents. They, by the by, are still living next door. Lucy Tobin, the Sand Museum, and what a curiosity that must be. Remarkable, it was crammed full of British icons.
Yeah, I think in this country we're a bit down on ourselves and we forget just how big we are and how much the world recognises some of our landmarks. I know as a Londoner you can run around town and complain about the tube and moan about your journey and forget to look up and see what kind of landmarks we're surrounded by all the time, and just how much those brands are worth abroad.
If only we can get them to take that love of all things Britishness and buy more British goods.
Well, I think that's what companies are trying to do, kind of branding themselves British, because made in Britain is a valuable commodity.
It's a valuable thing for your business.
Absolutely. Everything is made in Britain, and it's what people like about our brand, amongst other things, but it is important.
And you export, you sell to where? To Japan?
We sell all around the world, but mostly Japan, America, Europe and Britain, but we do export worldwide.
And there is a value attached to that if you are able to say it is made in Britain.
Absolutely, there's a real kudos to it, and especially in these times it stands for a lot.
Tim, you're a Canadian based in Britain. Is Britishness attractive?
Always, everywhere, and certainly in our industry, in the film industry, British films travel very, very well. And one of the areas of the British Film Policy Review looked at last year was whether we should have a British brand for films and actually have a little logo and identify them as British films. Some of these films travel really well.
Aren't they seen as very posh? They're all sort of Gosford Park, aren't they?
There are the Gosford Parks, and they are kind of counterbalanced by the in-betweeners.
Yes.
And which
That's about as far away as you could possibly get from it.
Other end of the spectrum, but also a great movie and second highest grossing film of the year last year here.
Now, look, the use of technology, even in the hairdressing trade nowadays, Rosie, you in your business, even though it's jewellery, you tend to think of that as a great and ancient craft, but technology is key in your business too.
It is key, but we do have lots of skilled makers in Britain. All of our jewellery is laser cut. And initially we didn't go to China and create moulds because we couldn't afford it and we didn't have the volume of sales.
Because that was the alternative, it was to get it done in China.
Essentially, that is the alternative, but we decided to create our own way of making, and it involves very skilled makers, and it is an ancient craft, but we do try and push the boundaries using technology.
When you say it's laser cut, does that make it look differently, or how does that affect the design?
It gives it a very straight edge, but it does have a different look, and because every piece is handmade, it does have a quality to it that you wouldn't otherwise have.
And laser's going to be the big technology in the cinema trade at some point.
It's on the horizon. Laser projection technology is the next big thing in our business, and I'm seeing 3 demonstrations next week in the States of it. It throws an incredible amount of light on the screen, so it's very, very exciting for both 2D and 3D pictures.
I know you don't like people who stand up during movies, but the use of lasers is a bit of an aggressive deterrent, isn't it?
It'll prevent them from setting up again.
Yeah, okay. The Hippo, and that brings us, Lucy, to the thought of how you encourage and nurture the next generation.
Yeah, well, I think that's something the government's got to try very hard to do at the moment, because we've got this generation coming out of university who can't find jobs, and entrepreneurialism is, the key to do that. I've just written a book, Entrepreneur, and the number of young people who are interested in setting up their own businesses and kind of going down the innovative route and starting something new, it potentially could be great for Britain.
Well, hopefully they can learn from Rosie and from Tim's stories tonight as inspiration. Are they looking at being entrepreneurs because there's nothing else available? Or are they looking at it and thinking this is a great and possibly the best choice?
I think it's gone beyond the kind of first idea. Yes, there are fewer jobs out there, and that's going to encourage people. But on the other hand, it's a great job to go and start something that you can call your own. I mean, you guys know better than me, but to go and start something and a baby and watch it grow and hire people and have your own flexibility and not have to be a corporate drone sounds quite appealing.
Not having to be a corporate drone. You were a lawyer once, weren't you?
I was, but I think, if you look at, there's been this incredible gravitational pull to the city with all the best and the brightest students in the last 30, 40 years. And I think showing them that there's an alternative, showing them that there is a way of being successful and having a lot of fun as well. And I think being an entrepreneur and getting some of those young, talented students into business, into entrepreneurial startups, is going to get this country back on its feet again.
So what was the trigger for you? What was the thing that made you leave the law behind and become a cinema entrepreneur instead?
Well, I've always loved movies, so I'm very fortunate to be in a business that I love. But for me, I was, during the last recession, 1990, I was an M&A lawyer with Freshfields.
That's a mergers lawyer.
Yes, and business had just stopped, like it has now, and I was bored. And I answered a very small ad in the Financial Times to join one of the studios, which was
a very
in
small
1990.
ad.
A very small ad.
You could have missed that quite easily.
It's amazing how things happen in your life. Yeah.
It's just one of those serendipitous moments, one of those sort of trigger points, I suppose, pivots is how you'd describe it. But there's a step from going into the cinema business and then deciding to set up a company that becomes one of the dominant players in the cinema trade. What made you think you should set up and run your own business?
Well, there's a number of areas. I think a lot of entrepreneurs that you speak to, they kind of have that eureka moment. And my moment was I was walking into the Finchley Cinema, which was a Warner Brothers cinema at the time. And in those days, they were building these very kind of loud, noisy, brash cinemas. And there was this affluent couple that were walking by, and they looked in and they walked away. And I thought, we're alienating a large part of our potential customer base. And it was that together with, I think, studio life. I think studio executives are probably the only executives in the world that can put investment bankers to shame in terms of their expense budgets. And I just thought, I can do this better and cheaper. And I think that was the beginning. And I left about 6 months later and started the company.
You've got 71 sites in the UK and elsewhere at the moment, and I know you're planning to open more even in these difficult economic times. How do you decide where a new cinema should go?
The hardest part is deciding where you're not going to go, because we're one of the few businesses that we get letters weekly, monthly from local councils pleading with us to go in and open up a cinema. We're a big part of the community. People remember their first dates, and kids go out, and it's a safe haven for young people to go and watch a film. And it's very, very hard to turn people down. But we have a very, very sophisticated kind of screening process where we'll probably end up developing 1 out of every 15 or 20 sites we look at.
That's quite a sort of high rate of attrition, 1 under 20. But what's the contributing factor, though? Is it how much people are willing to spend? How many people are likely to go through the doors? What are the variables you look at?
Well, I mean, we typically look at a 20-minute drive time. So we look at a snapshot of a community or a snapshot of an area, and obviously that can be stretched if you're in certain areas in parts of the country where people drive in a lot further. And then there's centers like we have right across the street from us here at Westfield, London, which have absolutely phenomenal gravitational pulls. Both Westfield sites, both here in Stratford, people are driving in an hour plus to come in. So you have to kind of factor in all the different elements, and then you look at in terms of the actual affluence of the customers or willingness to spend. We adjust that accordingly. So
You mean how much they will spend on popcorn? Is
yeah,
a key
well,
figure?
no, I mean, no, it's the whole package. I mean, if you look at our
hot dogs as well.
but tickets too. I mean, if you look at our price board across the street at Westfield, which is similar to all of our sites across the country, we have a price point that starts at £1.25 up to £20. So we try to cater to all of our customers everywhere in the country.
Okay, Tim Richards, good to talk to you. Thank you very much. The big business story next week is likely to be Tesco. It's expected to reveal its worst performance in decades. It's selling less stuff in its British stores and it's making a lot less profit at home. Several of its top bosses have already walked the plank. Chief Executive Phil Clark will reveal his turnaround plan on Wednesday. More emphasis on smaller stores, cutting back on new big hypermarkets and hiring more staff to improve customer service will all be on the bill. Lucy, what's gone wrong with Tesco?
Well, first of all, let's have a bit of perspective. I mean, yes, profit's going to be down, but it's still going to have a pre-tax profit over 3 billion this year, and I don't think many businesses would sniff at that.
And still selling 1/3 of the groceries we buy, of course.
Exactly.
But still, it's not glad,
But yeah,
confident morning there anymore.
It's a slowdown. I think it's become a little bit arrogant, actually. It's always has its detractors. Farmers have complained about how they're squeezing margins, and communities have got annoyed about it, opening too many branches, squashing local independent shops. But now it's actually gone a little bit further and annoyed its customers. It's cut back on staff, so customer service levels have dipped. I mean, if you walk into a store, they look a little bit sterile, a bit industrial, where places like Sainsbury's, Morrison's have been investing in their stores. Obviously, a big rival, Asda, has been waging a big price war, so people have kind of drifted away from Tesco. It's been the biggest player for too long, and it's kind of forgotten about the UK, concentrated a little bit too much, say, on international.
So too big for its boots, really.
And the problem with that is that the UK has been the cash cow, where it generates all the money that it can then go and spend abroad. If that kind of slows down, dries up, then it's got big problems.
This is an interesting point, Rosie, is that it's the story behind it is that Tesco grew and grew and grew and grew, and you could argue that it has grown so much it's become almost unmanageable. Now, your business has grown pretty quickly, 40% in 1 year. So how do you manage that rate of growth?
Managing growth it's tricky, but essentially we're in control of every area of our business, whether it's the design, the manufacturing, distribution or retail sales. So having all of that under your umbrella means that you can make sure that every time you're throughout the growth, you're in control and you've got very stringent forecasting and you know where you're at.
Is there a payoff between growth and what you can control?
I'm sure there is, but
not quite yet,
Not
which
quite
is a good position to be in. Your business had a big expansion as well. You were 6 cinemas, and then overnight you took over, I forget which one it was you bought now. It was a Warner.
We bought 5 companies, but we actually started with 0.
Yes,
so
you went from 6 to 42 in one particular
yes, we did.
deal.
Yes, that's right.
How did you manage that step change in the business?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult, and I think the challenge is to try and keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive in a company as it grows, and I think for us, having all of our key executives have a stake in the company, they think like owners, and that's a big part of it. And I mean, we have individual executives who will cut their own budgets because they know it's for the greater good of the company. And you wouldn't see that in a big company with a huge bureaucracy where people are worried about their entrenched positions. And so I think for us, having our managers think entrepreneurially is very important.
Lucy, there's a bit of pressure from some Tesco investors to perhaps pull out of the United States. It's taken a lot of investment, a lot of time, and very little to show for it at this stage. Should they leave the States?
I think they put in too much to kind of just walk away right now. I mean, I was at the Tesco AGM last year, and you always have, well, alongside a lot of bonkers investors there, you always have some people saying, what are you doing? It's got too much. When they opened Fresh and Easy in 2006, they slightly arrogantly said they would break even in 2 years. Several years on, we're still not at that
there
point,
yet.
but they do claim this year again that they are going to break even this year, and I think they have changed the stores a lot. When they originally opened, the Fresh side wasn't quite what the Americans wanted, and I think they have changed it. It does look like it's on the up, but investors will be watching.
Okay, we'll see on Wednesday what it's got to say for itself. Lucy, Rosie and Tim, thank you very much. They say you should never go into business with your